Well, a great pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to the voice of the United Kingdom, Mike Cattermole. Always a great pleasure to talk to you, and at a particularly exciting time for South African horse racing fans following the INVESTEC Derby. If you wouldn't mind, Michael, could we discuss what transpired in the Kipco 2000 Guineas? But first of all, welcome to Teletrack.
Yeah, hello, Andrew. It's a great pleasure to join you. Yeah, we're very much looking forward to the INVESTEC Derby, which obviously has got South African connections with the sponsors. Following the Kipco 2000 Guineas in Newmarket, of course, at the start of this month, when Night of Thunder sprung a huge surprise by defeating the very much touted colts Kingman and Australia. With Australia, Andrew, coming out of that race, I think with his reputation very much enhanced vis-a-vis the Derby. He's a horse that's beautifully bred. He's by Galileo out of Ouija board. Both, of course, his parents won the Derby and the Oaks by long margins. And, whatever he was going to do over a mile, surely he's going to be built on when he steps up in trip. And he's going into the INVESTEC Derby with a lot of stable confidence, and he's trading very short right now, around about even money, I believe, if not slightly bigger than that.
So he goes into the INVESTEC Derby with the expectation of the trip being far more to his liking than the 2000 Guineas, whereas conversely last year there were huge stamina question marks about the unbeaten new approach.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a terrible experience at Epsom, was never going to stay. This horse, Andrew, they've always said that the Derby would be his race, but they've been touting him up as one of the best they've seen at Ballydoyle for a number of years, well, if not for a long time anyway. What was revealed quite recently, though, was interesting. Apparently he suffered a bout of coughing before the 2000 Guineas, which was kept very quiet, surprisingly perhaps. So you'd expect him perhaps to even build on not only form-wise on what he did at Newmarket, but certainly pedigree-wise. I mean, he's going to step up big time on Derby Day and will take, I think, the world of beating.
Just touching very briefly on the INVESTEC Derby last year, I've heard it said in some rather celebrated circles that the form lines of that particular Derby turned out to be one of the worst in the past 20 years. Now, obviously, we're very sad to lose Mars, who Mike de Kock bought from just outside the placings, and Libertarian, the rest of them. It was a particularly unmemorable, if there is such a word, renewal of the INVESTEC Derby last year.
Yeah, which is a shame, isn't it? I mean, we always want the best races to show the best horses, but, when he won the race last year at the time, we thought, well, he's clearly a very good horse. To be fair to him, Andrew, he put up a very good performance at the end of the season when he was a very close third behind Farah and Cirrus des Aigles in the Champion Stakes at Ascot. He wasn't beaten Farah that day. That was probably the best performance of his career. He stays in training. He didn't perform out in Dubai on the Tapita track there in the World Cup, so he'll have other days. But it's funny because the race that Camelot won a couple of years ago at Epsom as well also didn't work out at all well. But they're talking Australia up in a different league to Camelot, apparently. So, the hype machine is rocking and rolling at Ballydoyle, I promise you.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating, because at the time that Camelot went into the INVESTEC Derby, he was touted as the most balanced, beautiful individual, and Aidan O'Brien couldn't sing his praises high enough. And, he did everything that was asked of him, but subsequent to that just didn't train on.
Well, I think I always regarded Camelot as being a bit unfortunate, Andrew. He had a lot of expectation heaped on his shoulders. He's a handsome horse. He almost came up with the goods, didn't he? I think the problem was that he had a very, very hard race on very heavy ground in the Irish Derby, and that seemed to take the gloss off him. And sadly, when he was defeated in the St. Leger, I don't have any issue with Joseph's ride that day. He wasn't good enough, Camelot. Beaten by Enki, who was one of the horses, of course, who was found to have banned steroids in his bloodstream on testing much later on. So, but nonetheless, the association of that leaves a rather sour taste in the mouth. It was a brave decision to go for the Triple Crown with Camelot. Sadly, it didn't work out for them, which was a real pity. But on his day, he was clearly a very, very good colt.
Well, there have obviously been some very significant pointers to the race, the most important of which are obviously the 2000 Guineas and the Dante Stakes. But it doesn't end there, because rules are there to be broken. And obviously we've seen horses that have won those races flop dismally on this rather quirky course. But it doesn't look like that will be the case this year, with the surrounding glamour that Aidan O'Brien has bestowed upon Australia.
He said at his open day to the assembled media that day, he said, this is the best horse I've ever trained. And then he corrected himself and said, the second best horse. And his best horse he reckoned he's ever trained was Isterbrack, who was the triple champion hurdler, of course, from the last decade. So he was having a bit of fun with the press. But yeah, Aidan is in the business of making stallions, Andrew. And he does that job very, very well. Does it on the track. And he's also very good at speaking them up, bigging them up. On that front as well. We've heard similar sort of PR skills before from Aidan. Camelot, the horse that just failed to win the Triple Crown, was another one that he bestowed great things upon from his mouth. And indeed many other good horses such as Hawk Wing in the past as well. So a little bit of spin involved, but with Australia at the moment things look like maybe fulfilling his great prophecies here.
Well, you know, Michael, I was having a chat to one of the learned gentlemen from Investec who are out in South Africa for the Investec Derby, which was run on J&B Met Day over 2,000 metres, strangely enough. And he was referring to the quirky nature of the course, that anybody in their right mind would never design a course to hold the world's most important thoroughbred horse race. But that, I think, is the unique nature of Epsom itself.
Yeah, Epsom is a crazy track. You cannot, when you first go there, you can't believe it. It's uphill, downhill. The camber is all over the place. It's a fantastic test of a thoroughbred, and through the years, it's been shown that you very, very rarely get a poor winner of the Derby, or at least put it this way, Andrew. Very rarely does the best horse fail to win the Derby. It's a unique test, and if you can come through that and show all the athletic abilities, notwithstanding all the the pressures on your mind, because the noise and the razzmatazz there is huge, and they've got to come through all that as well. It's just something else.
Well, I was having a good look at an interview conducted by Claire Balding yesterday with Sheikh Mohammed regarding the favourite last year, who flopped so dismally as a consequence of his tireless pulling in the race. Well, it just took care of him when he turned for home. But, this year he must be gravely disappointed with the performance of the favourite for the Dante Stakes, because you were quite bullish about the horse, the Grey Gatsby, who won, I thought, rather cozily.
Yeah, the big disappointment is that the Grey Gatsby doesn't have a Derby entry and wouldn't be a mile and a half horse anyway. But true story, he was odds-on favourite to win that race. As you know, Andrew, with Kieran Fallon, controversially in some aspects, being booked to ride him in place of Silvestre de Souza, just didn't perform. They spent many a long time back at the Godolphin stables trying to get this horse to go into the stalls, because he wouldn't go in the stalls when he won on his reappearance at Newmarket. It took a long time for him to go in. This time, he went in there as quiet as a lamb. He came out, he was a little bit keen early on. But when Kieran Fallon put a gun to his head and said, "Come on, let's go and win the race," he looked slow. This horse, he looked very far from being the top class horse that we'd hoped he might turn out to be on that evidence. And in the end, he lumbered home a one-pace third behind the Grey Gatsby and A-Rod. Kieran Fallon blamed the ground. He said he'd be a better horse over a mile and a half and on quick ground. But I think you're clutching at straws here. I think he's in some respects, he's gone backwards from his very, very promising reappearance from Newmarket, where he bolted home by 7 or 8 lengths.
It's quite uncanny, really. You cited earlier on Aidan O'Brien being in the business of making stallions, but really when you compare the comparative track records of the Ballydoyle operation as opposed to Godolphin, without being in any way disrespectful to Godolphin, they really are quite amateurish in winning this race. Well,
they haven't. They've never won the Derby, as you know. Sheikh Mohammed has won it before, of course, but Lantara back in 1995. We're carrying different colours in those days. That was in the early days of Godolphin. Walter Swinburne rode him that day. They'd be dying to win this again. I mean, Dawn Approach was always going to be a bit of a struggle for him to stretch out to a mile and a half last year. He was a tip-top miler. But true story, at least he offers you some sort of encouragement from his pedigree. He's not going to be a horse that's not going to line up without a chance of staying, at least, because that's exactly what he's bred to do. He's by Manduro. who's that top, international stallion who's sided so many good horses, Scirocco and all those other horses, and Darshan is the dam, I think, the dam's sire as well. So the pedigree, just shouts out mile and a half. It really does. It's the same family as Oh So Sharp, Andrew, as well. You may recall her winning the Triple Crown back in the 80s.
Yes, indeed. We had a very, very accomplished stayer, 10 furlong horse called Icelander, who happened to have been out of Oh So Sharp by Chris, and he really was one of the finest racehorses. Very unsound he was, but a revelation. He broke the track record after 712 days, but that's ancient history. What you're actually saying to me is that the winner of the INVESTEC Derby will come out of the Kipco 2000 Guineas on the face of things, rather than the Chester Vase or the Leopardstown Derby trial or any of the other races that have been run.
Yeah, I think so. With the way it's looking at the moment, to be honest with you, Andrew, it's a disappointing build-up to the Derby. We'd rather hope there'd be, two very good horses at least taking each other on, and then, whichever comes out best on the big day. But with True Story flopping in the Dante, it meant that many bookmakers trimmed Australia to odds-on. Aidan O'Brien has got a great chance of mopping up in this race. He could easily train the first three home. I would say, though, there's one horse who finished second in the Dante, a horse called A-Rod, trained by Peter Chappell-Hyam, who's very lightly raced. He's a horse that will improve at a mile and a half, and he could spoil Aidan's attempt, if you like, to fill the frame. But Aidan won the Chester Vase with Orchestra, who scraped home by a narrow margin that day. He won the D Stakes with Kingfisher, all these horses, and Geoffrey Chaucer, who was third in the Derristown Stud Derby trial. I think he's more highly regarded than the other two horses. So I could see Aidan almost having a 1, 2, 3 here, perhaps, or maybe a 1, 3, and 4, or something like that. But Australia at the moment has so many ticks in the right boxes.
Finally, Mike, Snow Sky from the Sir Michael Stout stable, the winner of the Lingfield Derby. Any prayer there? Yes,
quite possibly. Generally speaking, the Lingfield Derby trial hasn't thrown up the winner of the race, Andrew, since 1998. High Rise won it. Do you remember him?
Yes,
Luca
indeed.
Kumani. But Snow Sky, he looks like a nice horse, but he didn't have the Derby trial at Lingfield this year was quite weak. He was second to Western Hymn on his reappearance. Now, Western Hymn, trained by John Gosden, is a very interesting horse. He's another one that goes into the Derby, I think, a little bit overlooked by most people. He was a bit workmanlike in the classic trial at Sandown, but I think maybe Snow Sky, he's entitled to take his chance. Sir Michael Stout, he's a master, isn't he? He's having a good season again, Sir Michael, but I'm not sure he'd be quite good enough to win a Derby.
Well, I think what we're going to do, Mike, is we're going to put the INVESTEC Oaks on the back burner until next week, because we've really got a chock-a-block program to cover the colts, these illustrious colts. Just touching on that, there have obviously been horses that have won this race that have not been seen again. Horses like Poimois, who were so impressive, horses like Camelot that we referred to. But there are others that just become sensational horses, such as See the Stars, who's right up there with his great father in respect of the stallion ranks currently on offer. Yeah.
Well, See the Stars is proving a very promising young sire, Andrew, and he's got a great chance of winning the Oaks with a filly called Tagruda, trained by John Gosden, who won the Pretty Polly Stakes at Newmarket really impressively. I think this could be Paul Hannigan's first classic winner. I think John Gosden's never trained an Oaks winner before, but you can almost see ticks for See the Stars, Gosden and Hannigan here if she goes and wins the Epsom Oaks.
Well, I really look forward to catching up with you, hopefully next week if your busy schedule permits, so we can dissect the running of the INVESTEC Oaks. But in the meantime, Michael, as always, a great pleasure to chat to you. Thank you very much for your time, and we wish you a prosperous and safe week ahead.
Thanks, Andrew. We'll speak soon.
Au revoir.
But See the Stars is going to win the Guineas and Derby double. Goes on to win well, Fame and Glory is second. Tight third. Master of the Horse has finished on in company. It's a blanket finish for the places, but no doubt about the winner. See the Stars becomes the first in 20 years to win the Guineas Derby double.